They stole my house while I was in the hospital, but I had the last laugh. I'm 73 years old and I never thought I'd be telling this story on the internet, but here we are. My name is Linda, and what my own flesh and blood did to me would make your skin crawl. Before I dive into this nightmare that turned into the sweetest victory of my life, please hit that like button if you believe family should never betray family, and subscribe because you won't believe where this story goes. Also, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. I love knowing I'm not alone out there. Now let me take you back to the worst day of my life, which eventually became the best. It started with chest pains. Sharp, terrifying pains that shot through my left side like lightning. I was alone in my house, the beautiful 3-bedroom colonial that my late husband Thomas and I had bought 42 years ago. Back when our children were still young and our dreams were still intact. Thomas passed 11 years ago, God rest his soul, and I'd been managing just fine on my own. But that Tuesday morning in March, my body had other plans. I somehow managed to call 911 before I collapsed in my kitchen, right there on the linoleum floor that I'd scrubbed just the day before. The paramedics told me later that I was lucky to be alive. Heart attack. A serious one. I spent 3 weeks in the hospital. 3 long, lonely weeks hooked up to machines, being poked and prodded by doctors who spoke in medical jargon I could barely understand. My daughter Sarah visited once. Just once in those 21 days. She was 45, divorced, and always seemed to be angry about something. She'd barely stay 20 minutes, checking her phone the whole time, asking questions about my affairs and whether I had updated my will recently. I remember feeling uncomfortable, but I pushed the feeling away. She was my daughter. Surely she was just concerned about my well-being. How naive I was. My son Michael didn't visit at all. 42 years old, married to a woman named Jennifer who I'd never particularly warmed to, working in real estate and always talking about investment opportunities and market values. He sent a text message. 1 text message in 3 weeks. Sorry mom, swamped with work. Get well soon. 4 words of actual substance. That's what I was worth to the boy I'd raised, the child I'd sat up with through countless nights of fever and bad dreams, the young man whose college education I'd helped pay for by working double shifts as a nurse. When I was finally discharged, the social worker, a kind woman named Patricia, asked if I had someone to pick me up. Called Sarah. She didn't answer. I called Michael. Straight to voicemail. I ended up taking a taxi home, clutching my discharge papers and a bag full of medications, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt, even after Thomas died. At least when Thomas passed, the kids had been there. They'd hugged me. They'd cried with me. They'd seemed to care. The taxi pulled up to my house, and something felt wrong immediately. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. The lawn had been mowed. That was different. I usually paid the neighbor's teenager to do it, but I obviously hadn't arranged for that while I was in the hospital. There were tire tracks in my driveway that looked recent, deep gouges in the gravel. And when I walked up to my front door, fumbling for my keys with shaking hands, I was still so weak. I noticed the lock looked different. Shinier. Newer. My key didn't work. I stood there on my own front porch, the porch where Thomas had proposed to me all those years ago, the porch where I'd watched my children learn to ride bikes, the porch where I'd sat through countless summer evenings with a glass of lemonade and a good book, and my key didn't fit in the lock. I tried it 3 times, thinking maybe I was just weak, maybe I wasn't turning it right. But no, the lock had been changed. My heart started pounding again and I thought, this is it, this is how I die, another heart attack right here on my own porch. I sat down on the steps trying to breathe like the doctors had taught me, and that's when I noticed the for sale sign in my yard. My yard. A big professional sign with Michael's real estate company logo on it. I called him immediately. This time he answered on the first ring. Mom, you're out. How are you feeling? His voice was cheerful, almost manic. It made my blood run cold. Michael, why is there a for sale sign in my yard? Why doesn't my key work? There was a pause. A long pause. Then, Mom, we need to talk. Sarah and we've been discussing this and we think it's time you moved into a care facility. You're not safe living alone anymore. The house is too much for you to handle. We've already found a lovely place, very affordable, and we're going to sell the house to pay for your care. We changed the locks because, well, we didn't want you coming back here and having another episode. It's for your own good. For my own good. Those 4 words echoed in my head. I'd spent my entire adult life doing things for their own good, working night shifts so they could have nice clothes and school trips, sacrificing my own dreams so they could pursue theirs. And now they were stealing my house for my own good. You can't sell my house, I said, my voice barely a whisper. It's my house. Mine and your father's. Actually, Mom, and I heard Sarah's voice in the background. She was there with him. They'd planned this together. We've already spoken to a lawyer. You're clearly not mentally competent anymore. We're going to get power of attorney. The sale is already in motion. We have buyers interested. I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I sat on those porch steps, the spring sun warm on my face, and I cried. I cried for the children I thought I'd raised. I cried for Thomas, who would have been heartbroken. I cried for myself for being old and sick and apparently powerless. But then something shifted inside me. Maybe it was stubbornness. Thomas always said I was the most stubborn woman he'd ever met, and he meant it as a compliment. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was just the part of me that had survived nursing school, raising 2 difficult children, losing my husband, and a heart attack. I was not powerless. I was not finished. And I was certainly not going to let my children steal everything Thomas and I had built. I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I called Robert Morrison, who'd been Thomas's best friend since college and had practiced family law for 40 years. Robert was retired now, but he answered when I called. I told him everything. When I finished, there was silence on the line, and then I heard something I never expected. Robert laughing. Actually laughing. Linda, he said, do you remember what Thomas and I helped you set up about 15 years ago, right after he was diagnosed with cancer the first time? I searched my memory. There'd been so many legal documents, so much paperwork during that scary time. The trust? I said slowly. The irrevocable living trust, Robert confirmed. Linda, your children can't touch that house. You transferred ownership to the trust years ago. You're the trustee with complete control until your death. And the terms specifically state that the house cannot be sold without your explicit written consent. Even if they somehow got power of attorney over your personal affairs, the trust is a separate legal entity. They have no claim to it whatsoever. I felt like I could breathe for the first time in hours. But they changed the locks. They put up a for sale sign, which is illegal. That's trespassing, breaking and entering, potentially fraud if they're actually trying to sell property they don't own. Linda, your children just committed several crimes. The question is, what do you want to do about it? What did I want to do? Oh, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I want my house back. And I want them to understand that they can't treat people this way, especially not their own mother. Robert's voice became businesslike. I'm coming out of retirement for this one. Give me 24 hours. I spent that night in a hotel room, something I had to put on a credit card because my children had apparently also helped themselves to the cash I kept in my bedroom drawer. I discovered this later. I lay awake most of the night, memories flooding back. Sarah as a little girl, bringing me dandelions and calling them flowers. Michael learning to read, so proud of himself. Where had those children gone? When had they become these strangers who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to their inheritance? The next afternoon, Robert picked me up at the hotel. With him was a police officer named Detective Rodriguez and a locksmith. We drove to my house. The for sale sign was still there. Robert had already filed emergency motions with the court. He'd brought copies of the trust documents, the original deed, and about 40 years' worth of property tax records in my name. Michael's car was in the driveway. My driveway. We walked up to the door and Robert knocked. Michael answered. And the look on his face when he saw me with a lawyer and a police officer was almost worth everything I'd been through. Almost. Mrs. Linda Carter is the legal owner of this property through an irrevocable trust, Robert announced in his lawyer voice, the one that had probably terrified countless witnesses over the years. You are currently trespassing. You have illegally changed the locks and are attempting to sell property that doesn't belong to you. Mrs. Carter is willing to allow you to leave peacefully, or Detective Rodriguez here can arrest you for breaking and entering, fraud, and elder abuse. Your choice. I watched my son's face cycle through emotions. Shock, anger, fear, and finally something that might have been shame, though it was fleeting. Sarah appeared behind him. She was holding some of my jewelry, my mother's pearls that I'd planned to leave to her someday. I felt something break inside me that would never quite heal. You can't do this, Sarah said. But her voice lacked conviction. "We're your children. We're trying to help you." "Help yourselves, you mean?" I said, and I was surprised by how steady my voice was. "You thought I was powerless. You thought I was just a sick old woman you could dispose of. But this house isn't just in my name. Your father and I made sure of that. We set up the trust specifically to protect it from." I paused, searching for the right words from situations exactly like this. The locksmith changed the locks right there while we all stood watching. Detective Rodriguez took statements. Michael and Sarah had to remove their belongings. And yes, they'd moved some of their things into my house, into my bedroom, into my space. They'd gone through my personal items, my photo albums, Thomas's things that I'd kept in his study exactly as he'd left them. They'd found my jewelry box and helped themselves. They'd taken the silver Thomas's mother had left us. They'd even taken the Afghan that Thomas's grandmother had crocheted, the one that had been on our couch for 30 years. Detective Rodriguez cataloged everything. Michael tried to claim they were just keeping things safe, but the detective wasn't buying it. "Ma'am," Detective Rodriguez said to me quietly while Robert was having heated words with Michael, "do you want to press charges? What they've done here, this is serious. Elder abuse, theft, fraud, breaking and entering. They could face jail time." I looked at my children. Really looked at them. Michael wouldn't meet my eyes. Sarah was crying, but they seemed like angry tears, not remorseful ones. These were not the people I'd raised, or maybe they were exactly the people I'd raised and I'd been too blind to see it. Either way, they were strangers to me now. "Yes," I said. "I want to press charges." The aftermath was brutal. Sarah and Michael were arrested. The story made the local news. Local realtor charged in scheme to steal elderly mother's home. Michael lost his real estate license. Sarah lost her job, apparently. Attempting to defraud your own mother doesn't look good to employers. They both ended up with criminal records, probation, and court-ordered restitution. But here's the thing that really shocked them, the final twist they never saw coming. I changed my will. Everything I had, the house, my savings, Thomas's life insurance policy that had been carefully invested over the years, everything, I left to charity. The local hospital that had saved my life. The nursing school scholarship fund Thomas and I had established. The animal shelter where I'd volunteered for years. My children would get nothing. Not one penny. When Robert presented them with copies of the new will during the court proceedings, I was told that Sarah actually fainted. Michael demanded to see a doctor, claiming I must be mentally incompetent. The court-appointed psychiatrist evaluated me and found me to be perfectly sound of mind. Angry, hurt, and disappointed in my children, yes, but completely competent. It's been 2 years now. I'm 73, living alone in the house that Thomas and I built our life in. My health has actually improved. Turns out, stress from ungrateful children is bad for your heart. Who knew? I've made new friends through a local seniors group. I've taken up painting, something I always wanted to do but never had time for. I tend my garden and I sit on that porch in the evenings watching the sunset and I feel at peace. Sarah sends me cards sometimes. Hallmark cards with generic messages about family and forgiveness. She never writes anything personal, never actually apologizes. Michael doesn't contact me at all. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Jennifer divorced him after the scandal. He's apparently working as a used car salesman now. Part of me, a small part, feels bad about how their lives turned out. But then I remember standing on my porch with my key not working. Remember them casually discussing putting me in a home and selling my life out from under me, and that feeling fades. The house will go to charity when I die, and I'm at peace with that. Thomas would approve. He always said, "Linda, we can't take it with us, so we might as well make sure it does some good." The Nursing Scholarship Fund will help young people who are struggling to afford education, just like I struggled. The hospital will use the funds to help people who can't afford care. And my children will learn that you can't treat people as obstacles to be removed, even if those people are old and sick and seem vulnerable. Because here's what Sarah and Michael never understood. Being old doesn't make you stupid. Being sick doesn't make you weak. And being someone's mother doesn't mean you have to let them abuse you. I spent my whole life taking care of them, putting them first, sacrificing for them. And when I needed them most, they saw me as nothing more than an inconvenience standing between them and what they thought was their inheritance. They thought I was powerless. They thought I was forgotten. They thought I was finished. But they underestimated the woman who'd worked double nursing shifts to send them to good schools, The woman who'd held her family together after Thomas died. The woman who'd survived 73 years of life's ups and downs. They underestimated me because I was old, and that was their biggest mistake. Some people ask me if I miss them, if I regret pressing charges, if I wish things had turned out differently. The truth? I miss the children they used to be, or the children I thought they were. I miss the idea of family I had in my head. But do I miss Sarah and Michael as they actually are? No. And I don't regret standing up for myself. I don't regret refusing to be a victim. The house is mine. Every wall, every key, every memory soaked into the floorboards. It's mine, and it will be mine until my last breath, and then it will go on to help people who actually need it. That's justice. That's peace. That's revenge served exactly as cold as it needs to be. If there's a lesson in all this, it's simple. Never assume that someone's kindness means they're weak, that someone's age means they're helpless, or that someone's love means they'll tolerate betrayal. I loved my children, but I loved myself and Thomas's memory more. And when push came to shove, I chose dignity over delusion, truth over family obligation, and justice over the fantasy that my children were people they'd proven they weren't. So if you're out there and someone's trying to take advantage of you because they think you're too old, too sick, or too powerless to fight back, let my story give you strength. Fight. Document everything. Get a good lawyer. Trust your instincts. And never, ever let anyone convince you that you're worth less than you are just because you've accumulated years along with wisdom. I'm Linda. I'm 73 years old. I had a heart attack, and my children tried to steal my house. But I'm still here, still standing, still living in the home I earned with every day of hard work and sacrifice. They thought they'd won. They learned differently. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories like mine. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to stand up to family who underestimated you. Remember, you're never too old to fight for what's yours, and you're never so sick that you have to let people walk all over you. Stay strong out there, friends. This is Linda signing off, and reminding you that the best revenge is living well in the house they thought they'd stolen.